Well, as with all submissions, when the data was received by Wikileaks, it had to be cleaned, if I can say that. So there were no traces pointing out the source, and it had to be we had to be sure as well that this was authentic. But that is the usual process with all data submitted to Wikileaks. Well, the three publications that were originally involved with the Afghan data, they knew of the Iraqi material. So they were, we had a commitment to work with them onwards, and they were willing to participate in that and commit their resources on investigating the material. But we thought and believed that we should expand the scope to include more media into this process, and through the Bureau of Investigative Journalism we achieved that. That is all in line with the promise we give to sources to maximize the impact of the material that they leak to Wikileaks. It is unique in journalistic history, I think, to have so many media outlets working on the same material at the same time. The media outlets are not used to these kind of projects. I mean, they are not used to cooperate on a basis such as this one. But we relied very much on the expertise and skill that it was provided by the news outlets. There were probably 40, 50 professional journalists working on the material, and with researchers and additional people, we're talking probably up to 100 people. They have the expertise, and we relied very much on them, and that is the basic reason for the cooperation with the media outlets. Well, I mean, there are very strong stories that is revealed by this data, but it is the general trends and the full picture, which is the significance of this material. It also tells a story of the failings of the traditional media of reporting properly on the Iraqi war in the period. That should be something that should call for a bit of soul searching within the media, where they too much relying on the military for information. And even when we go to the military data, we see that there's a lot of information there that was withheld from the public. One thing in particular is the overall tendency, for example, to categorize deaths as insurgents killings when there are ample evidence to show that these are actually civilian deaths. This is something that we learned very early. We learned that when we released the Apache attack video in April. In the actual report from that incident, all but the two Reuters journalists and the two who were killed that day were categorized as insurgents. We know now that the estimate of death was far lower than the actual killings, and actually the death that they categorized as insurgents were civilians. So this is one example, but we see in the data that there is an overall tendency to categorize every Iraqi killing as insurgents. Well, journalists will be able to access it within a searchable format. We are also open to the possibility, because of the material being fairly over-redacted as is, to hand out, upon requests, the material to journalists who are interested in a special field, special categories, if I may say so, or some special events or time frames. With the Afghanistan war log, the approach was basically this. There was a reliance upon the categorization of the US military of their data. On that basis, 1 in every 6 report was withheld for line-by-line reduction. Those were 15,000 documents out of the 92,000. This time around, we took a different approach, which can be described basically as a reverse approach to reduction. At the outset, you decide that basically every thing in all the reports is harmful until proven otherwise. So little by little, you approach the material and reinstate words, locations, etc. So you approach it towards minimization of reductions, and what we are basically having at the end is an over-reducted version, but it could be a work in progress. There is, of course, limited resources, but the end result, whether it takes weeks or months, should be very limited and just the necessary reductions for harm minimization. So we can possibly call on academic institutions or other media organizations to help out in that progress. Well, I'm sure there are going to be tricky questions, especially with regard to the reductions as previously, and hyped up claim of possible harm. But I mean, you don't have to prepare for that. I mean, we just tell the truth about how we approached it. What we feel is necessary to why the material is totally necessary to be in the public domain. And that is the only answer we can give to criticism, basically, and the right one.